Where do we go from here? That's a very broad question. Yeah, I mean, I think first thing is the group, all of us need to take a step back, take a deep breath, recharge our batteries, take all of our individual looks at ourselves, reflections, things that we can take away from the season to learn from. I think that's been going on all during the course of the year. We've talked about that over and over through the course of the season. And try to clear our minds and find, the best possible solutions and the way forward. I think this group is a quality group. I think we need to understand what the off season is all about this off season. I think last year, because it ended so late, and it was a second year in a row ending so late, I think a lot of guys took the off season to just rest and recover, and I can understand that. But then we got hit into a tournament that was extremely hard and challenging right from the start. And I think the guys who really came in fit into the preseason and were able to get the most out of preseason remained pretty durable through the course of the year. The guys who really took the off season and tried to catch their breath and recover and tried to use the preseason to really get fit. In some ways, the start of the Champions League was very difficult for them and costly and for some guys. And so I think we, again, individually as players, as coaches, as management, everything, we learned a lot about what we're going to have to deal with next year, starting with Champions League, how to approach the off-season in a better way, how to approach the preseason in a better way. And always, no matter whether you win or lose, you always have to make roster decisions every time you go into an off-season. Again, I think we have a lot of quality on this team. I don't think the question is quality. I think we, again, need to reassess and make sure that all of our pieces fit together in the way that makes sense for how we feel like we should play and how we can be successful. And then the off-season is going to be about trying to find the right pieces to fit that. And for me, pieces include not just soccer pieces, they include character pieces, they include leadership pieces, they include everything that I think makes a team great in the end. You have to reconsider and think about all those things at the end of a season like this.
Greg, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but shouldn't all your players arrive at training camp in decent shape?
Yeah, that's I guess that's out of context. They come in decent shape, but the fact of the matter is, in a normal MLS preseason, you have 6 weeks to get yourself fit, and then you probably play 5 weeks, one game at a time, to get yourself into the season. I think when you show up to a preseason and you're at moderate fitness, which is normal, but then we have less training days. We immediately get into 6 games over the course of 18 to 24 days versus having 1 game a week. There's a difference between durable for match after match after match at the intensity that we had to play and being ready for an MLS season that starts 1 game at a time for the first 5 weeks, and then you start to get into multiple. So I think the expectation of where we all need to be in terms of durability and preparedness, even in the way we approach preseason, from a coaching standpoint, to get ourselves ready for what is really going to be demanded of us in an event like this, is we all learn from it, individuals as players, and how you take the offseason. Guys take the offseason in different ways. That's happened since the end of time. Some of it used to overcome some injuries and little things and to recharge their batteries. Some will use the offseason to get ahead of everybody else, and they'll really go hard through the offseason to try to add strength or size or any of those kinds of things. But I think now the group knows what they're getting into individually, and I think we'll use this off-season in the next 2 weeks to talk with each guy about what their off-season really needs to look like to make sure that they are prepared for what we will encounter when we enter. Right now it sounds like January 21st, and it will be just at 4 weeks when we start to hit the Champions League. And last year we did a lot of travel in preseason, try to prepare the guys for what to expect in preseason. We will take a lot of that travel out, because every time you travel, you probably lose 2 days or 3 days of training. We went to Mexico in order to show the guys and get them some opposition, Mexican opponents, and altitude. But the reality is, when you go to 5,000 feet, the intensity at which you can train comes down a little bit, because you're overloaded so fast because of the altitude deficiency. So we'll keep our guys probably at sea level at this time and push them from an intensity and durability and try to have more high intensity sessions just to get that durability back. There's, again, a lot of things that we can go through that we learn from as coaches, but also the players will learn from as they approach into the next season.
Yesterday, Michael said that perhaps the difference between 2017 and 2018, in 2017 there was a singular focus, and in 2018 a number of personal agendas emerged within the club. Did you see that in your roster, and if so, how big of a concern is that to you?
I think every year the variables are different, you know. Last year there was a singular focus. We came off of losing in a championship game. The group had an outcome and a vision of we're winning the championship. There wasn't a Champions League involved in that whole discussion. This year we can't Champions League. Everybody was really focused in Champions League. We also recognized, I think guys recognized and saw what Champions League, the toll it took sort of on the group. Now, when you go into a season, you have an idea of how you're going to play, but it could be three in the back. But if all of your center backs, except for one or two of them, are injured, then you've got to make an adjustment there. Now we're asking guys to play other positions sometimes. We're adapting constantly through the course of the season because guys are in and guys are out. And I think the loss of the Champions League probably did. I wanted to say for a lot of the season it didn't affect us, but I'm sure it did, both physically and mentally. You know, in terms of personal agendas, I think, you know, if guys all just need to be focused on the one thing, right, which is that we need to get better every single day. I think sometimes last year in 2017 we talked about the process and about getting better every single day, and it wasn't necessarily about just the championship, it was about the next game and getting better for the next game and getting better in the next training session. And once we won the championship, I think a lot of the discussion came about winning the championship. It came about some of those things. And the focus for me was not, our group needed a better focus of just getting better every single training session, every day, every game. And whether that be off the field, on the field, whatever those decisions that are being made when you're on your free time or here at the facility or wherever that is, the singular focus has to be on to be ready to be your best the next day. And that's where I think our mindset has to be, and I think sometimes we're looking too far beyond that. I think even myself at times, I just felt like as soon as we got healthy, we would start to find our rhythm again and we would get going again. We never really got healthy, so that never really came through, and we never really got ourselves going and started to build momentum. And so, you know, that for me is the singular focus, is everybody being the best version of themselves, myself included, every single day that we arrive, whether that be for training or game or anything else.
Greg, is there one key area or key position or multiple areas, multiple positions that you feel the team needs to strengthen and up to?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think we saw this year with Chris and Drew, I don't know if they played more than 45 minutes the whole season together. They were coming into the season, they were to be our starting center backs. They came into the season with the mindset of playing four in the back. We knew in Champions League we would probably use five just because of the challenges that we would face there. But then we never really saw the two of them together. I think we saw that, you know, Chris as our athletic center back, he's an eraser. He just makes things go away. He makes plays. He can take any individual player, in my opinion, out of the game as he needs to. And we saw that Drew is so vital in terms of his leadership and problem solving and communication and keeping a group on the field in sync. So if different things games adapt, teams change, they try to find different ways to get in, and you've got to be able to have that level of problem solving on the field at times, and you have to have that kind of communication. And I think with Drew not on the field in the back line, we lacked that. And I think we need to look for that, because if Drew for some reason can't be on the field, we still have to have that that is not a negotiable thing, is to have a communicator in the back line who can give some information. Again, at times we look for varying ways to find that, but it is definitely a vital thing, because the leadership on the back line is, for me, super important. We saw this year the depth, at times with our forward position, if Josie was unavailable, to be able to have a guy that can hold up a ball, that we can target a bit, that can bring the team forward and into the action, I think is always important. Secondarily, I think the game now is you have to have wide players who can hurt the opposition. You cannot play through the middle of the field, especially teams now defend us through the middle of the field and play us in transition. And if you cannot hurt them on the outsides, you cannot make them respect the wide areas of the field. And if you can't make them respect the wide areas, then you can't go through the middle, because it's just going to be too dense. So for me, it is also important to have some wide attacking play. We saw it the other night against Atlanta. I decided to go with Justin wide. It's not his natural role, but he just is an aggressive wide attacker. He's not a winger. I really wanted to see Lucas wide. That's one of the reasons why we brought him, was to play him wide if Seba and Josie were playing through the middle, but they were I don't know if they were ever really all three of them on the field together this year, so we didn't get to see that. But I really wanted to see Lucas wide, and he came to us. He was a wide player, and more than he was a second forward in Argentina. So we got him out wide, and he scores 2 goals. He creates some problems, and you see the value of wide play in a game, just like the other night against Atlanta, both defensively and offensively, to be able to stop teams from progressing up the field on the outsides, which sometimes in a diamond or a 3-5-2 isn't the easiest thing to do. When you cover more width from the front line, you can defend better, and I think all in all, in that night, we looked much more ourselves and much more, I thought, secure. And so we need players like that who can do that, and that's something that we also want to look for.
Following up on that, do you see Justin's future more as a winger in the midfield?
No, not necessarily. I think Justin's arguably the best left back in the league, or one of them. Again, a year ago in a 3-5-2, when we were able to maintain a lot of possession, we were in a good rhythm. He was able to really threaten the space behind, because we could give him the opportunity to get up into that position and to really be aggressive. That's not the way this year we went about things in terms of the quality of our play, or the patience in our play, or whatever we needed on the day to put Justin in those positions to be attacking dangerous. So I used him in that role for this game because I felt like we needed it. But I also think, like I said, I think he is a very good defender who at the end of the day, if we could find a player who can play in front of him and they can work as a tandem, and he can find the right times to get around and join in overlapping situations, that's for me the best way to use Justin. He's not a guy that you give him the ball to his feet and he can take people on. He can run into the depth, he can arrive into an attack, he can be a guy who adds into the attack, but I don't think for a whole season that the best way to use Justin is in a high attacking wide position. He's too good of a left back.
Presumably you're going to have, I guess, exit injuries, for lack of a better word, with each player.
Yeah, we'll meet with everybody
And typically,
over the course of the next
can you
couple
speak
weeks.
to, typically what goes into that conversation? Like, what do you discuss, and how much of what is said in that, what you hear from the player, you weigh in terms of bringing them back next year?
What happens in the discussion? Well, I mean, it's an assessment of the season. First and foremost, especially for guys, is how many training sessions were they in, out, the injury situation, especially this year for a lot of guys. How did we get into that situation? How did the injuries come about? It's again talking about that, assessing that. What can we do as we move into the off season to try to make sure that we take care of that, so they don't become an issue that carries over into the next season. Everything is again, it's about assessing what has transpired over the course of this last season, 9 months, 10 months, whatever that is, and trying to use that in a fruitful way to move forward. It's not to rehash a bunch of stuff that we've probably discussed over the course of the season, but it's to look at it and say, okay, now we have a window of time. What do we need to get done in this window of time to make sure that we are in the best possible starting position when we arrive back in January? And some of that has to do with standing in the team, role for next year, how we see things going. And I'm sure players will share where they feel they are in terms of the team or things like that. It's in some ways it's dialogue, but at the end of the day, it's coming out of that room on the same page, moving forward together.
Greg, there's been some talk about distractions and commitment in the team. Through all the adversity that you faced this year, did you get that from the players, that full commitment that you need to demand to be successful in this league?
I think we went through challenges. I think we went through ups and downs over the course of the year. I think the guys are human in some ways, and that when you encounter so many variables, some things become a distraction. The injuries became a distraction. That's one of them. We would go through training sessions over the course of a week, prepare one way. A guy would be out come Friday, and then we would have to make an adjustment coming into Saturday. It would be frustrating for the guys. It was one of those years that we couldn't get moving forward on anything on any consistent level. Even just the consistency sometimes of having a lineup, being able to put the same group on the field, build some consistency. It's frustrating, and the frustration, I think, became distracting at times for guys. And that is, either something A, we need to be better at, B, we need to not allow those types of things to bump us off. A, we've got to be better about keeping the distractions to a minimum. And then the second is everybody, again, needs to be focused. Everybody, you could probably go through every player and say, at some level, in some way this year, they were distracted, over-frustrated, disappointed, thinking about something different in a moment, right? Everybody, I think, in a challenging season can go through that moment, and I think we were no different this year.
Greg, can I ask you about, from an X's and O's point of view, you mentioned earlier about the wide players. Throughout your successful time here, you've obviously been handed some really good players, but you have probably had a lack of creative wide players during your time here. If you were to find one or two of those players, do you think that maybe you might move to a 4-3-3 shape going forward if you had that? And if that's the case, is that an area that you think Sebastian could maybe play in a wide area going forward?
I think, just from a philosophical standpoint, I believe that the game is about wide players now as much as anything. I think when you look at the best teams in the world and the teams and the coaches who set some of the standards around the world, everybody is playing with wide players, and I think a lot of that is because teams are pressing or teams are playing in the counter. And when teams press you, you don't have time to get your fullbacks into high positions and to be wide attackers. You have to have wide attackers either be forwards or be wingers. If teams are sitting and playing on the counter, their guys who are countering out are very good wingers who are very good attackers, and you don't want your midfielders caught in positions having to manage very good wingers in the transition. And therefore, in the game now, I just don't think there was an era where fullbacks overloading the middle and fullbacks were a primary part of attacking football. And I don't think that is the way it is now. I think you have wingers who are your primary wide attackers because the way the game sets up now, you have to have wide play, and you have to be able to work teams over in the wide play, and you have to be able to manage things also defensively in the wide areas. And so again, I think the formula that was really successful for us at one point is probably not the most successful formula for us at this moment or going forward. And I think we have to adjust and adapt with the game as the game does. And I think we have to have players. It's not to say that we can't play in the ways that we have in the past, but I think you have to have the ability to hurt teams in the wide channels. I think that's where the game is most effective now. And I think the game evolves. It always goes through evolutions, and I think we're in one over the last couple of years that we're seeing. There was even a couple of years ago, you see a lot of teams playing a 3-4-3, and the 3 in the back was a big thing. I think part of countering that was to play with wingers who could really hurt, right? These different evolutions happen, and I think that's something that we have to be able to be a part of. It doesn't have to be our number one strategy, we have to be a part of. As far as Seba on the wings, I think Seba he can play from a wing, and the way he plays, he I think deserves and needs a little more freedom to find areas. He's a player with so much talent and the ability to create goals, set up goals. We want to get him into as many goal-scoring situations as possible. I think he can, and we can use him in that capacity at times. I don't think he's an out-and-out winger at this point. I think the wingers should be guys who really want to threaten space behind the opposition to get in the depth. It's guys who who can take guys on one-on-one, which for sure Seba can. But I think Seba is also, he's a provider, and he does a lot of things for us. I know he doesn't want to play out on the wing in isolation or in some of those situations. So I think it's something that we can do, and we can use it at moments. We used it a little bit in the Champions League in the final. I asked him to drift out wide and really play from a wide position because he just had 2 guys marking him all the time, and it's hard to double team a guy out in the wide zone. And so we can use him in that fashion, but I don't think he's not a guy in my eyes that I would consider an out-and-out winger for us.
Greg, on the injury front, has your sports science or medical staff, have they been able to tell you specific things that should be done differently to try and prevent these injuries, or was this just the season from hell?
Yeah, well, there's always things that you learn from and we can do differently. I think the biggest thing is understanding how to go through. There are time periods in a season where you play a lot of games in a really short period of time, and in our league, you add to that immense travel, and travel days are full days. It's a lot of times it is it's commercial travel, and you're in an airport. You're in a lot of these. You're spending a whole day in travel. You lose some training days. In addition, you have a lot of games in a short period of time, and so for us, we had a lot of those blocks this year, more than anyone has ever had in the history of the league. We went back to try to find how many times teams have had to play 6 games in 18 days. Right? I think we had 2 of those blocks or 3 of those blocks when you include Champions League. Your risk of injury goes up 33% in those blocks. And so these are all things that we've been learning and dealing with over the course of this year. How do we manage that better? How do we prepare the guys better? We need to have squad rotation. The problem was after we hit the very first one of those and started to lose guys, then we started to lose the ability to rotate squad because we didn't have the depth. We'd already lost 5 or 6 guys. So squad rotation, that's what I said coming out of Champions League is the problem coming out of Champions League isn't that part of it is that we got a lot of guys injured, but the next part of it is that we were running our next group of players into the ground, and then it just became this cycle, right? Because, 1 week after coming out of Champions League and Josie having surgery, Drew had just gone down, Chris was out, Victor was sort of coming back. We had 1 week off. We actually had to come back after the championship. We played that very same Saturday, 3 days later against Chicago. We had a 1 week break, and that week led us into 3 more games. And that week we lost Markey and Ash because JMO was already out. So we lost 2 more players. So again, just how we can hopefully have a little better influence on our schedule and us recognizing how to try to expand our game schedule out a little bit clearer. Squad rotation, preparation, all kinds of things that sports science for sure is learning and has learned through this process and managing it. And it all starts with the preseason and the beginning of the season, because if you're behind it at the beginning of the season, sometimes it's a challenge to catch up during the course of a season, especially when you're playing games all the time. Again, a lot of our guys were returning back to our team in the middle of playing a bunch of games. They weren't really returning back to our team when we had 2 weeks of training, and then you could get them 8 training sessions under their belt of high intensity level to have them ready to play high intensity games. It ends up that they're coming back in a situation where we're chasing the pack and we're in the middle of another series of games. And so again, a lot of things to take away, and our return to play as well as our preparation and our schedule management, all these kinds of things are, there's no stone unturned in this discussion of how we can be better in that way.
We saw a glimpse of it this year, but could Gregory Vanderbilt's long-term future be at center back?
Yeah, he's a capable center back. Greg he's a very good soccer player. He is not a vocal guy. He's not a communicator. He's not organizing. He's not moving pieces around. But he's a smart soccer player and he's a good soccer player. For me, he's kind of a hybrid between a guy who can play wide and a guy who can play through the middle. And because he's a good soccer player, he can play through the middle. He's not a physical player, as some center backs are. The Kendall Wastons of the world who have physical presence and who are hard and real communicators. He's a cerebral center back who can make good soccer plays and he's very comfortable on the ball. He and Chris can play together. When they play together, it's pretty quiet though for everybody else around them in terms of leadership and communication. But he's capable. So can he do it? Yes. He can also be capable, as we see, a right back. I thought he had a nice game this weekend being a right back. I think again Greg is better at this point in his career having a winger in front of him where he can choose his moments, but he also has a guy he can play with and not necessarily having not as a wing back to run up and down the sideline, or as sometimes as a wide player in a back line where he's expected to be high and in the back. I don't think that's the best position for him at the moment.
Greg, we've spoken about the value of consistency in MLS rosters. Are you anticipating there being a lot of turnover in this offseason, or would you like to see a majority of it come
I don't think there will be a lot. I think, I think there is probably some key pieces that we need to add that probably will adjust between players who will go, like they do every year. I think if in order to be competitive in all tournaments, league, everything, I think we have to get a little bit deeper in terms of veteran players deeper. I think if you want to win, the formula in our league to win all things is you either have a very young group who is very durable and run hard and recover fast, especially when games are coming every 3 or 4 days, or you have a veteran group who is cerebral and efficient and they play the game smart, and when you bring guys on, they are also cerebral and efficient and they fit into the group. I think the challenge sometimes is getting caught in between the two, where you have a cerebral, efficient group, and then you have some young players who are less efficient, and the more young players you kind of mix into that, the less efficient the team becomes. And so I think, again, finding the right balance for us, I think we had it a couple years ago, just because, and also we had less competitions to play in and less matches. But this year, a lot of the depth that we had in our group was quite young, and so if we had to rely on 3 or 4 of our really young guys all at the same time, the game became a little less efficient for our veteran guys as well. And so I think finding the right balance so that you can be successful in all competitions is really important, and that's the efficiency of MLS rosters. You have to, you don't want to get caught in between sometimes. And this year, obviously, with all of the injuries, we really saw a lot more playing time from some of our younger guys who don't have a ton of experience, but got a lot of experience this year. And so I think, again, continuing to find the right balance there is important.
There's going to be some MLS jobs open. Just wondering if anyone has contacted the club guys to speak to, Robert.
None that I'm aware of right now.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Greg.